Hello friends, looking at current affairs for 10th July. The news items picked up from the Hindu newspaper are these 14. We'll look at them in detail. The first one, G20 hails India's labor reforms startup policy. So this is regarding the recent G20 summit. We know about it already. We have been discussing it. So in this G20 summit, which took place in Hamburg in Germany, the Hamburg Action Plan, which has been adopted, mentions India and praises it for its efforts which it has made for ease of doing business. So India wants to improve its ranking in ease of doing business, the doing business report which comes every year through World Bank. So India's ranking last year has been 130, just one notch higher than the previous ranking. So we want to improve here majorly, and that's why various reforms have been brought in by the government presently, and these have been praised in this Hamburg Action Plan. So this is there. It says that the Hamburg Action Plan says that India has made number of attempts. It has popularized number of derivative instruments in exchanges. So this is regarding stock exchanges, the derivatives. You should know about derivatives which are there in stock exchanges. So these are even commodity exchanges derivatives which are there. Then also it has facilitated external commercial borrowings by startups. So this is also praised. Also labor market reforms which have been introduced, female participation has been increased, security has been provided to workers. So these are also made specific mention in this Hamburg Action Plan. So this is there, you know, this is the ranking, 130th ranking, one position up from the previous year. So this is what we want to improve, and you can see World Bank ranking includes all these provisions which are listed down below. I will take you to it. So this is regarding the World Bank ranking. So this is more important because this has been in news quite often and will continue to be in news because government is majorly making efforts to improve ranking on each of these parameters. There are 10 parameters on the basis of which World Bank ranks countries for ease of doing business. So here you can see the parameters. First one is getting electricity. So how quick is it to get electricity connection in the country? Then enforcing contracts. How soon are contracts enforced? How quickly a business can be started up? How soon can property be registered? Insolvency resolution means if somebody is going, a company is going bankrupt, then how soon can this insolvency procedure be wrapped up? So that is seen. Then construction permits, how quickly are they given? How quick can you get credit loans in the country? Protecting minority investors, how efficient is that? In paying taxes, how much ease or facilitation is provided? Trading across borders, how it is ranked. So here you can see India's ranking in each of these parameters are shown here, right? So this, on each of these parameters we want to improve a performance so that our overall ranking also goes high. This is the ranking shown here. You can see 131 to 130. So even 2017 ease of doing business report of World Bank is already out. In that the ranking is 130. Believe me, this is going to come up in news quite often. Almost maybe every month or even multiple times in a month too. Because even World Bank evaluation is going to take place after 2 or 3 months now. So at that time also again it will come in news. Then next is flood situation in Assam worsens. So this is regarding the flood situation here which has deteriorated further and has caused the loss of lives too. One more life was lost, taking the total number of deaths in Assam due to the floods this season to 26. So 26 people have died and many have been displaced. You can see nearly 5 lakh people have been hit by these floods in Assam. So here the river, you can see river Brahmaputra, which is a huge river is flowing above danger mark in various places in Assam. Even the central government has assured the Chief Minister of Assam that all assistance would be provided by them. This is regarding the flood situation here. You should know about even crops have been damaged because of these floods. Then the next news item here is Ahmedabad becomes India's first World Heritage City. So India has got its first World Heritage City now, apart from joining in the league with various prominent international cities like Paris, Cairo of Egypt, Edinburgh of UK. These cities, and also in Asian subcontinent as such, the cities which have already been given this World Heritage City status are Bhaktapur in Nepal and Gale in Sri Lanka. And now we have Ahmedabad, the walled city of Ahmedabad, which has become India's first World Heritage City. So this is Ahmedabad city was founded by Sultan Ahmad Shah in the 15th century, and this is a walled city of around 5.5 kilometers as such, and has 4 lakh people living here in 100, over a century old, means 100 years old wooden residences. So there are around 600 neighborhoods, and this is called a living heritage. So this has been recognized by UNESCO World Heritage Committee as such. United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. This is prominently known for giving World Heritage Site status to various entities, and here it is a World Heritage City status given. Then next is, this is the walled city shown here of Ahmedabad. Then next is another feather in Cambodia's cap. So this is regarding World Heritage Site status too. This is a site, not a city status. So we have various World Heritage sites, but Ahmedabad is the first World Heritage City. So this is regarding an international World Heritage Site, not from India. This is from Cambodia, a Southeast Asian nation. So here already 2 prominent World Heritage Sites are there. And these are Hindu temples, originally Hindu temples, now also used by Buddhists. So these are Angkor Wat and Preah Vihar. So these have already been given World Heritage Site status by UNESCO in 2004 and 2008 respectively. Presently, another temple, Sambor Prekuk, is a temple in forests, a temple in the richness of forest. So this has also been given World Heritage Site status. So this is the current affairs news, but then you should know about these 2 prominent temples. So this was this Khmer Empire in Cambodia, in this region, which was known for having built these Hindu temples, but the present site predates these. This has been developed by Chenla Empire, which is preceding even the Khmer Empire. So Khmer Empire is known for this Angkor Wat, Preah Vihar Hindu temples being constructed. Even Preah Vihar had been under a conflict, a border dispute between Thailand and Cambodia, which was finally resolved too. So we'll see a little about these 2, because these are Hindu temples. So our heritage culture is also associated here. Even Jainism, Buddhism, Hinduism originated in India. So here you can see this is the present site which has been given in forest region, these ancient temples given the World Heritage Site status. And this is the Angkor Wat. This is a very prominent monument. This is also present on the Cambodian flag as such. So it symbolizes Cambodia, Angkor Wat temple. So we'll see a little about this temple. So it is an Indianized temple complex in Cambodia. It's said to be the largest religious monument in the world. Angkor Wat basically means capital temple. So it was originally a Hindu temple of God Vishnu. Again, this is also prominent because all these temples which we find here are majorly Shaivat temples dedicated to Lord Shiva. But this Angkor Wat temple was a Hindu temple originally dedicated to Lord Vishnu. So this was of the Khmer Empire, as I just mentioned. Khmer Empire was known for these temples, but later it was transformed into a Buddhist temple because Hinduism declined in this region later and Buddhism became prominent. So later it has been converted into Buddhist temple. So this is there, as I said, it appears on its national flag also. Then this is the Preah Vihar temple, again another World Heritage Site status of Cambodia, but this is in the border region. So there was a dispute whether this site lies in Cambodia or Thailand. But finally this dispute was resolved by International Court of Justice in The Hague, and it ruled in favor of Cambodia. So this is also a Hindu temple. This is a Hindu temple dedicated to Lord Shiva and later converted to use by Buddhists. Then the next news item is easy access to H1N1 drugs raise fear of resistance building up. So this is regarding 2 drugs which are used to treat H1N1. So these H1N1 virus means swine flu. The 2 drugs which are there is oseltamivir and zanamivir. So these 2 drugs which are used for treating swine flu, one is in the form of a tablet and another one is in the form of a powder. So these 2 drugs have been removed by the authorities, Indian authorities, from Schedule X category and have been put under Schedule H1. So under the drugs and cosmetic rules. So because of this action, there have been concerns raised in some sections in the medical field. What are these concerns? We should understand that, because now the thing is that what is the difference between this Schedule X and Schedule H1? That should be clear first. So you can see under Schedule X, if there is a drug which is mentioned under Schedule X, then in that case 3 copies of prescription are required. One will be maintained by the doctor, another by the patient, and the third one should be there with the chemist, and the chemist should maintain this copy for up to 3 years. So this is there, he should be preserving it. And also not all chemists can sell these Schedule X drugs. Those chemists who hold a special Schedule X license can sell these Schedule X drugs. So it's a restricted category that should not be freely available. And Schedule H1 category, which is there in this is actually a part of Schedule H, means actually Schedule H, some drugs from Schedule H have been removed and kept under Schedule H1. So this step was taken, and now the step taken is from Schedule X. These 2 drugs have been put under Schedule H1. So there are restrictions here, because Schedule H, you should know, Schedule H drugs means there is this prescription not to be sold without prescription from registered medical practitioner. So that is what is mentioned on these Schedule H drugs which are there. They need a prescription, only then they can be sold by chemists. And Schedule H1 here is a special requirement also, that the chemist has to maintain a copy of the prescription until 3 years. So this copy here again has to be maintained by the chemist. So this is the another category here created. So now what has been done is these 2 drugs have been put under Schedule H1. Now why this step has been taken? The reason is that there are increasing cases of swine flu. So the central health authorities have advised doctors that these drugs can be prescribed based on strong symptoms even if they have not gone for swab test. To make step has been taken, and the medical field, some section in the medical field is raising concerns, because if drugs are freely available and if the doctors prescribe them without caution, then it will result in their misuse, and the same thing that we are seeing with antibacterial resistance, similar thing can crop up with respect to these flus also. Now flu is virus, these are caused by virus. So you can see influenza virus type A and type B. So these are antivirals. Oseltamivir and zanamivir are antiviral drugs. These are not antibiotics. So these antiviral drugs, again, then another point which is put forth by another doctor is that bacteria mutate much faster than viruses. So in them mutation takes place and they develop resistance. But in case of viruses, this is not so quick. And since there is a spot in H1N1 cases, this action is supported by this particular doctor. So there are differences in views, but this is the fact about the whole thing. And there can be resistance developed in viruses also, though it may not be as quick as in bacterial cases. So there is a need for caution and concern in this case as well. So this is there. You can see here the details of H1N1 also given, swine flu. So it's a respiratory disease caused by type A influenza, right? It's an airborne infection. So the symptoms are also given. The treatment, the drug is also mentioned here, Tamiflu, anti-flu. And the advisory to doctors, advisory to patients, that they should consult the doctor immediately if there are symptoms. Medicine should be taken only as prescribed by the doctor, and you have to drink plenty of liquids, and food rich in vitamin C has to be consumed in case of H1N1. So this is there, and here you can see the virus vaccine has been developed. This is a virus vaccine, will always be having an attenuated version, but in case of H1N1 vaccine, it is a killed virus vaccine which has been developed. So this virus vaccine is works by exposing a subject to small dose of the virus, which helps the body to develop immunity to the disease. So this is how all virus vaccines work. And H1N1 particular sections which are at risk are pregnant women, children below 6 years, senior citizens, and patients with comorbid conditions who are already suffering as such. Then this is regarding antibiotic resistance too. So antibiotic resistance is for bacteria. So bacteria, you can see if there are lots of bacteria and few are drug resistant bacteria as such in your body, then if you take antibiotics, all other bacteria are killed, but these drug resistant bacteria thrive, and slowly they multiply and they grow further and further, and this results in resistance developing. Then these are the causes of antibiotic resistance also mentioned. You must have done it quite often by now. This is very prominently in news. This is caused due to overprescription of antibiotics. Even if you're not taking antibiotics as prescribed by the doctors at the regular intervals and completing the course, if courses are left incomplete, then it results in antibiotic resistance developing. Even unnecessary antibiotics used in agriculture and even on animals and those being consumed results in antibiotic resistance. So these are also some of the cases you can see mentioned here. The next is antibiotic resistance makes gonorrhea treatment harder. This is World Health Organization, which has now stated that data from 77 countries, including India, shows that there is antibiotic resistance developing, making gonorrhea treatment difficult. This is actually a sexually transmitted disease caused by a bacteria. So this bacteria is evolving resistance now, and this is a cause of concern. So treating it is becoming very difficult now. So here, this is the detail mentioned here. So then the next news item is Adarsh probe names top officers. So this is regarding Adarsh Housing Society scam. So this was proposed as a housing society for Kargil war veterans and widows of these Kargil war victims. And this was actually a 6-story housing society which was proposed in a key location of the defense authorities in Kolaba, near the sea face as such. So this Adarsh Housing Society later evolved as a 31-story apartment complex, and it has already been built. The building is already in place, and many houses in this housing society have been taken over by politicians, by bureaucrats, even army generals, and even not them, then their relatives, somebody associated with them, have their houses here. So in this case, an inquiry had also been initiated by Maharashtra government. 3 chief ministers of Maharashtra involved here. Even 2 former army chiefs have also been named. So even CBI has initiated its investigation, and even Defense Minister recently had set up a committee on this matter, and it has also given its inquiry report, and it has said that 2 former army chiefs, including General Deepak Kapoor and General N.C. Vij, have been involved in this. So it has recommended that these 2 generals should be debarred from holding any government office, and also there should be appropriate administrative measure against them, because there cannot be any disciplinary action. They have already retired. So this is also there. Even army has presently recommended demolition of this building because it says it overlooks the Kolaba military station in South Mumbai. So there are security concerns here too. So demolition has also been suggested. Even the Bombay High Court had actually ordered demolition, but Supreme Court has stayed this demolition order. So this is there. The details of it are also given. The former Chief Minister of Maharashtra, Ashok Chavan, also had to resign in 2010 because of this. Vilas Rao Deshmukh also resigned in 2003 later. So then the next news item is South Sudan marks grim 6th Independence Day. So this is the youngest country in the world, South Sudan, which was formed in 2011, and it is its 6th Independence Day. But there are no celebrations because since 2013 there is a civil war going on in this region, and it still continues unabated. And it has caused suffering for the people here. Even the president of South Sudan himself says that it is difficult for many people to afford even 1 meal per day. So how can there be any celebrations? So there is hunger, mass displacement, war crimes accusations. So it's actually a war, a civil war, because of government and the opposition forces fighting against each other. So this has brought suffering in this region in South Sudan. The South Sudan capital here is also Juba, which lies on the banks of White Nile River. You can see this was Sudan, and out of Sudan, this South Sudan was formed as a separate nation. And this is its present capital, and it is suffering now. So this is the Nile River flowing from Egypt, you can see here, and it has these 2 bifurcations, White Nile and Blue Nile River. This is there. Then the next news item is EU-Norway crab row could fuel Arctic oil tensions. So this is EU and Norway's fighting, means European Union and Norway. So actually Norway is not a member of European Union. This is one important fact which you should know about. And why are they fighting in this region, Svalbard? So what is happening is that in Svalbard region, you should know the map here too. This is the EU map also, you should know. So this is the 3 nations here, Norway, Sweden and Finland. So Norway, you can see it's not a member of EU. So there are EU members shown, and EU and Eurozone members are shown in darker color. UK of course is exiting from EU, but the exiting process is going on presently. So this is the map shown here. Right. Cyprus also, which we discussed yesterday, it's also a member of EU. Here, the latest member is Croatia here. It joined EU in around 2013. And then what is the dispute here going on is in the Svalbard region. So this is the North Pole shown, and this is the Finland, the nation. And this Greenland here belongs to Denmark, which is a European Union member. Here you can see. So this Greenland region here belongs to Denmark. And this region is where the dispute lies. This Svalbard archipelago as such a group of islands is also belonging to Finland. So the dispute here is because of the interpretation of this 1920 Svalbard Treaty. So in this Svalbard Treaty, what it mentions is that Norway has full and absolute sovereignty in Svalbard region, but the other signatory nations also have right to economic activity in Svalbard and its territorial waters. So this right, how far does this right lies? In that interpretation, there is a difference, because Norway says territorial waters means up to 12 nautical miles, but then EU says that this is up to EEZ, means 200 nautical miles around Svalbard. So they have the right to economic activity. So this is the dispute, and presently the EU has allowed ships to undertake fishing in this region. So this is the cause for the dispute. So actually this present dispute is on fishing. So fishing rights are being disputed in this region because EU has allowed this recently a Latvian ship. So this was allowed to have fishing done in this region, and the ship was intercepted by Norwegian Coast Guard and was made to pay a hefty fine. And what were they doing? They were crab fishing. So now this crab fishing, this is actually the snow crab which is found in this region. So snow crab fishing is being done here. But this is said this is not actually a fishing dispute, but a dispute with respect to oil exploration dispute, because this snow crab is also a species which lives in permanent contact with the seabed. So this fishing which is done is not the normal fishing, because if somebody is having some species having permanent contact with seabed, so you have to go underwater till the seabed and then fish them. So this is actually more similar to oil exploration than fishing. So that's what the whole dispute is all about, is being stated as well. So here, this is the region. This is the UN clause nomenclature also, which you should already know about, and this has been coming up quite often again and again. So this you should know. This is very important from environment perspective too. The territorial waters, this is the nomenclature used in UN clause, which extends up to 12 nautical miles. This is said to be the sovereign territory of the region from whose baseline this water is been extending. So this is 12 nautical miles. Then comes the contiguous zone, which is another 12 nautical miles beyond territorial waters. So this also here the state, means the country to which this is extended. This country can have control in this region too, to prevent customs, immigration and other laws can be imposed in this region as well. Then the next is the exclusive economic zone. So EEZ is the complete 200 nautical miles from the baseline. So this entire EEZ is under exclusive economic zone, the sovereign rights of the territory for exploration for economic resources. So like mining, oil exploration can be done. Beyond that is international waters, right? And even EEZ can extend further to if there is a continental shelf region. So that beyond 200 nautical miles to up to 350 nautical miles, you can have your EEZ maximum. If there is a continental shelf of this region, you can see this is the continental shelf. So if this extends beyond that region to beyond 200 nautical miles, then you can have EEZ till that nation can have EEZ till up to 350, not more than that, right? Then the next news item is 2 large groups bid to supply equipment for Chabahar port. So this is regarding Chabahar port, which is there in Iran. You can see this region is shown here. So this is the Gulf of Oman. So this is the only port extending to the ocean, the Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean here, which lies in Iran. And Iran has been making efforts to develop it for long. So this Chabahar port, another thing you should know, is very close to the Gwadar port of Pakistan. It's around 72 kilometers apart. And Gwadar port has been there is huge investment coming in from China for development in this port. And India is proposing to develop this Chabahar port. And India's steps are also being delayed because Iran, there were US sanctions, international sanctions by UN also on Iran because of its nuclear program. Now the sanctions have been removed. There is already Iran nuclear deal which has been signed with the P5 nations. So now after this, what we are seeing is P5+1. So what we are seeing is that again a renewed effort is being made for development of Chabahar port by India. But now Iran is adamant and it is increasing the claims as such. It wants around 150 million credit in place before this is allotted to India. Now, why India is also interested in Chabahar port is because it is very close and will give access to India to Central Asia. First to Afghanistan and further to Central Asia, which is also an oil-rich nation. And Pakistan does not give us access. So, through land route, through Pakistan, Afghanistan, we can approach Afghanistan and Central Asia through Pakistan on the land route. So, from here, you can see the western part of India. You can easily reach Chabahar port through the sea route, and further, we have already developed this road. Siraj Delaram road has already been developed in Afghanistan by India and under the BSF, and many deaths have also occurred under terrorist attacks because the Siraj Delaram road was being constructed by India and there were terrorist attacks during this time. But we have successfully completed this, and there are further plans to develop this road and bring connectivity from Chabahar port to Afghanistan and then further to Central Asia. So this is the plan. So now Chabahar port for this project, the latest news which had come also was that Iran is negotiating with Russia also on this. But then we have already signed an MOU. It is in May 2016 that an MOU has been signed. Memorandum of Understanding between India and Iran for development of Chabahar port. So this has been signed, but then the final contract has not been signed. So it will take, even the operation of two berths will commence within a period of 18 months maximum after the contract is signed. So contract has not been signed yet. So, but the latest development which has taken place is because we have our authorities here in place who are initiating the development of this project. So it is Indian Ports Global Limited. So it has invited tender bid for giving key equipments in this region, and two major Indian conglomerates have also bid for supply of this key equipments. It is actually mounted quay cranes which are required in this Chabahar port construction. So steps are being taken here is what is being seen. Then the next news item is demystifying debt funds as an investment option. So this is regarding debt funds. So we have done this earlier too when we discussed mutual funds. There are two types, equity funds and debt funds. So equity funds means you are investing in equity, in shares of a listed company. And in debt funds, you are investing in debt instruments. So like instruments like government bonds. When government wants a debt, money, a loan, then it can acquire loan from bank and it can acquire loan through government bonds which are sold off in the market, but these individuals cannot buy, of course. Then there are even companies which give these papers. So these are called commercial papers, certificates of deposits, or even non-convertible debentures. So these are various instruments through which debt is taken by companies. So in these debt funds, you can also invest in them. So you are contributing for it. So what happens is when you're giving a debt, you have an interest income which comes forth. So you will get an interest on that debt as such, and the capital amount will also come back to you. But in case of equity funds, there is more risk, because if the company does well, the shares value go high, you get huge profits, and if it goes down, then it is huge losses also. So there is no confirmation that you will get your capital amount and interest will also come. So here there is huge risk and of course huge avenue for making profits also. And here there is lesser. So here there are different types of debt funds also, like long-term and short-term debt funds. So even government bonds generally, also called G-Secs, government securities, are generally long-term funds. So this is being discussed here. So the three aspects, equity funds, debt funds, and fixed deposits, are shown here. You can see. So equity funds, this will be risky, risks are higher, and also returns are higher. So this is equity funds in shares. Debt funds, here there are risks are low and returns are fixed. So this is there in debt funds. So this is funds primarily invested in corporate, government bonds and securities. And fixed deposits are with banks. So these are safe investments. So fixed deposits, they have predefined maturity and you will get a particular interest rate. So these are having the least, in terms of profits, you will make least profit here than debt fund and equity. And in terms of risk, these are the riskiest. Then the next news item is process eased for exporters who have not paid IGST. So this is regarding integrated GST. So this integrated GST means under GST there are actually three GSTs. Central GST, state GST and integrated GST. So central GST means applicable to, means it will be all those commodities which are sold in a state. So within a state there will be central GST and state GST, means which will be going to the center and what will be going to the states. Then there is integrated GST which will be applicable to interstate trade. and even to import transactions. So these integrated GST, they are collected and shared between the center and the states. So for this integrated GST, there are exporters. For their goods, they are actually having some imported commodities or some commodities which are being used, on which they have to pay tax. And this integrated goods and services tax, which is applicable to them, this tax they have to pay, but then exporters, as you know, they get this refund also. So for that case, actually the law says that they can pay this later. So they have to, but they have to provide a bond or letter of undertaking promising to pay the tax. So now the details about how this bond should be provided for, the letter of undertaking should be from whom, there was not a clarity on this, and now the government has provided this clarity. So this has eased the concerns of exporters. So that is the present news. That specific news is fine, but what is more important for us is to understand GST and these three types of GST. So generally, you know, when you say 28%, the maximum tax slab which is there, so 28% is also understood as 14% of center and state. So center will get 14% and state will get 14%. So that is also an understanding as such. So GST tax, which is applicable on a particular commodity, both are included, the center's share and the state's share both. So that is how GST is also functioning, and integrated GST again would be shared. So this, the point is, who would be collecting it? So that is the. Then the next news item is concrete may help curb air pollution. So concrete, which is used for construction in urban areas, is a major material which is used, most widely used material, and also an inexpensive material which is used for construction, concrete. So cement kilns, they manufacture concrete as such, they produce concrete. This a study has shown, an international study has shown, it can help tackle air pollution because it can absorb sulfur dioxide. So sulfur dioxide is a major pollutant in air, and this can be absorbed through this concrete. So if this is information known, then urban planning, urban design can be rethought of, and this can be effectively put into use. So even concrete, which is waste concrete, can also be used to minimize air pollution. So this is a study being done. Even this is especially important because World Health Organization has also made estimates that air pollution is causing premature deaths. It says as many as 7 million premature deaths take place around the world due to poor air quality and pollution. So this is a study which has shown that how concrete can be used effectively for this purpose. So here you can see the most common pollutant, as the most common source of this pollution or sulfur dioxide pollutant is actually power plants. And second comes cement kilns. Cement kilns which manufacture concrete also emit 20% of all sulfur dioxide of industrial emissions, but these can be absorbed and further too by concrete as such. These are the pollutants shown here, the primary pollutants. You can see majorly it's carbon monoxide, then comes sulfur oxides, which are pollutants in air, and the sources are also shown here: transportation, fuel combustion, and industrial processes. Then the next news item, the last one, is Saint Teresa's blue bordered sari and intellectual property now. So the Trademark Registry of India has granted registration of trademark to this blue border of sari. The blue border pattern, which is there, one dark, one broader blue stripe and two smaller blue stripes. So these saris are worn by nuns of Missionaries of Charity, which was headed by Mother Teresa. So this sari has now been given intellectual property. It has been given this trademark. So this is the information here, and you should know about Mother Teresa. She was from Albania, from Europe, Albanian descent, and she had served the people in West Bengal on the streets of Kolkata since 1948 till her death. She nursed the diseased, she provided food and shelter to the poor and the destitute, wearing this white sari with 3 blue borders. So this sari has now been given the intellectual property status. So these are the news items. Thank you.